When visitors arrive in Ocean Grove, one of the most interesting aspects of life here concerns the tents around the Great Auditorium. People have numerous questions about them and their history, and we hope this video will help to answer some of your questions. Our video will focus on two topics. First, we'll share some of the history of the tents, and secondly, you'll tour through one of the tents hosted by Gail Hunton, whose family has been a part of Ocean Grove's history. Gail has graciously opened up her tent for our virtual visitors. So let's begin with the history of tents. In 1867, Reverend William B. Osborne, a Methodist preacher, attended a week-long outdoor holiness camp meeting in Vineland, New Jersey. Osborne's enthusiasm knew no bounds, and eventually he found an ideal camp meeting site, a secluded community on the North Jersey coast, where spiritual and physical health could be renewed. Thus, on July 31st, 1869, a group of ministers and friends camped at Thompson Park, now called Founders Park, and, after a candlelight prayer service, dedicated themselves to establish a permanent Christian camp meeting community called Ocean Grove. In the Camp Meeting Association's annual report of 1870, the use of tents was mentioned. To accommodate the camp meeting, 140 to 150 tents of the Round Lake Camp Meeting were hired for $500. Additional cost included transportation to and from Round Lake, wages, traveling expenses, and board of the overseer sent with them. The arrangement, which seems costly, was not made until after considerable inquiry among tent owners, and these were found to be the most advantageous terms they could make. The treasurer's report will probably show that the heavy cost of transporting and the expense of the overseer, the rental of these tents, did not more than pay their cost. And if they did that, they did well. If the association is able, it should by all means purchase tents for its own use before another meeting. In July of 1871, 50 new tents were purchased, and in July 1872, 100 more of various sizes, mostly large, the smaller ones in little demand. 43 second-hand tents were purchased for $600. In 1873, 50 more tents purchased, increasing the total to 217 tents, and were valued at $10,021. And in 1876, 600 tents in Ocean Grove were established, with 310 belonging to the camp meeting. In the early days, some people purchased lots from the Ocean Grove camp meeting, but not for building a cottage on the lot, but for erecting a tent. Lots with private tents were sold as one would a cottage, and many ads can be found. For example, if you go to our website, go under Research, look at digital newspapers, and find the Ocean Grove record of January 11th, 1879, you'll find a newspaper ad offering 2 lots with a fine large tent and a servant's tent. People who visited and stayed there said, "Tent life is a change. We live in houses and cottages at home." The first auditorium was a tent, and in fact, tents were used for services as well as for living for a long time. But by October 25th, 1879, the Ocean Grove Times reported that cottage owners requested that no tents be allowed on the corporation property east of Central Avenue. But even till the 1880s, some boarding houses had tents in their backyards for staff. In 1876, the camp meeting began offering 7-foot by 8-foot and 8-foot by 10-foot portable kitchens. Those kitchens came in 2 sizes. The 7-foot by 8-foot was at a rental price of $7 for the season, or the 8-foot by 10-foot came at a rental price of $10 for the season. The first season kitchens were offered. Demand was so great that the camp meeting ran out of them. But the 1878 price list declared that enough kitchens had now been provided to make one available for every tenter that desired one. Tent living had been very simple with common cooking, eating, and washing areas. The portable kitchens made a change in their lives. By 1879, furnishings offered for rent included bedstands and cots of various sizes, tables, chairs, nightstands, washstands, pillows, bolsters, and even mattresses. Various kinds of tents were offered for rent by the association. A price list for 1879 weekly rentals. If you rented an A tent, it was $1 a week. A wall tent, a 9x9, was $2.25 a week, and a wall tent that was 14 feet by 21 feet cost $5.25 for a week. An A tent was the common military shelter of the era. Posts at each end supported a ridge beam. The sides of the tent were attached directly to the ground. Wall tents were considerably more comfortable since they offered headroom over the floor area of the tent. A raised platform was most desirable to prevent rain from entering the tent. Those on some tents extended beyond the front wall and served as a porch. Originally, the tent floors were temporary wooden affairs, but this proved inadequate. In the 1881 annual report, it was noted that additional permanent tent floors have been built. Of this number, 26 have frames, so that in the erection of the tent, nothing is needed but the ridge pole and the stretching of the canvas, which requires but a few minutes when the work of erection, which formerly consumed much time, is complete. Putting down permanent tent floors saved not only time, but money, as much as lumber was lost in the yearly putting down and taking up. The most important part was the canvas covering. Those used are often described as being white. This fabric had much in common with sails on a ship and were often made by the same firms. The many tents purchased from the Hemingway firm had special waterproof and mildew-resistant qualities. As an extra precaution against leakage, tents were provided with a fly. This was an additional sheet of canvas placed over the roof, but not touching it. Flies also served to shade the tent roof, making it cooler. The front edge of the fly was frequently given a decorative treatment. Additions to the basic tent were ventilators, windows, awnings, and square doors. The ventilator was a small opening near the top of the tent to allow hot air to escape. Windows were provided on the side of tents and also had closable flaps. Tents moved ahead with the innovations of time. Eventually, permanent wooden cabins came to have water, gas, and electric service, allowing stoves, refrigerators, showers, and toilets. Another major departure from the early tents is that tents have wooden screen doors with a hasp, allowing for a small padlock. What happened to the tents in the winter? Originally, they were collected and stored in a building which was located on Auditorium Square. It was built in 1875 at the corner of Pilgrim Pathway and McClintock. In 1879, the Ocean Grove Annual Report reported the, quote, unsightly brick tent house on the southwest corner is to be moved to some other fireproof locality, and this will give unity to the whole square, end quote. A new brick tent house was constructed at 45 Bath Avenue. In 1883, changes were coming for tenters, according to the Ocean Grove Record in the March 17, 1883 issue. Quote, the platforms of tents the coming season will be elevated above ground, with double kitchens well built in the rear. An enclosed yard will adjoin the tent to afford shelter in wet weather. Now is the time to make application for yours, as the demand will probably exceed the supply. In the Ocean Grove Times of June 6, 1952, an early resident talked about the reason for storing the tents separately. Quote, at first the tents were rolled up and stored for 9 months in what was known as the tent house. It is now a 2-story brick apartment house on Bath Avenue. This was all right, but one day a little flat bug got in, and eventually so many bugs were there that this method of storage had to stop. Today, the canvas for each tent is stored in its own cabin. If you have bugs, you brought them in, and you'll have to care for them." End quote. On June 25, 1912, the Bath Avenue tent house caught fire and was completely gutted. At that time, it was still used for the storage of tent flies, awnings, and spare tents. The two-story building with slate roof was rebuilt. According to the Ocean Grove record of July 21, 1875, two of the rules that the camp meeting had regarding tents and cottages was: 1, every tent company should see that at least one of their numbers is left in charge both day and night to guard it. 2, the occupants of each tent or cottage, upon retiring for the night, should place a pail of water at or near the front or rear entrance to their tent, so that the same may be of easy access in case of fire. Now, on August 24, 1893, a major storm hit Ocean Grove, causing severe damage to the boardwalk and the Ross and the Little Gore pavilions. According to the Ocean Grove Times of August 26, 1893, quote, "Tent people suffered most. The force of the winds made ribbons of the canvas dwellings, and many had to take shelter with neighbors who weathered the storm." End quote. People then, and as they do now, began to beautify their tents. The Ocean Grove record reported on June 28, 1879, quote, "On the edge of the camp circle, beautifully fronting on Kingsley Place, the eye of the visitor will be arrested by one of the finest family tents yet erected in the grove. It is owned and occupied by Mrs. F. W. Ellicott of Philadelphia, who has displayed the most consummate taste in the cultivation of flowers and the arrangements for family comfort during the heated term. The whole establishment might be called a bower of beauty." End quote. And in the Ocean Grove record of August 18, 1887, quote, "Singing canary birds in ornate cages are quite numerous in the tents and cottages of Ocean Grove. That one on the front circle, who tried to help the congregation in their praises, is beginning to attract sonic notoriety. He kept on in such an ear-piercing way the other morning. While Mr. Platt was preaching, we could hardly hear at times the words of the sermon." End quote. Following the traditional camp meeting layout, tents were situated around the congregational area where services were held. These were often laid out in a circular pattern. While Ocean Grove had a more rectilinear plan, the tents closest to the great auditorium are still called the front circle. A premium charge was imposed for renting these tents. As the popularity of Ocean Grove increased, the need to enlarge the seating area led to the relocation of tents. The 10th Annual Camp Meeting Report in 1879 stated, "After an experience of several years, we found it necessary to readjust the tenting grounds in the vicinity of the great auditorium. The tents were too close together and the avenue too narrow for proper sanitary regulations." July 3, 1875's Ocean Grove record stated, quote, "As early as 1875, a premium charge of $5 was mentioned for tents on Lake Pathway, which extended along the southern shore of Wesley Lake." End quote. In 1879, major improvements were made to the lake shore that probably led to the removal of the tents there. According to the 11th Annual Camp Meeting Report of 1880, quote, "The tents formerly along the front of Wesley Lake from Central Avenue to the ocean were also removed this year, 1880, and located satisfactorily, mainly south of Broadway." End quote. There was a South Side tent colony between 1894 and 1938. The tent colony was subject to an arson attack in 1938. 10 tents were destroyed at a loss of $2,000. However, this did not involve the entire colony. The Ocean Grove Times on April 22, 1938 said, Quote, the tents in the south side of Ocean Grove that were demolished by a fire Friday morning, April 18th, will not be rebuilt and will be removed entirely, end quote. Just a week prior to the fire, it was announced that the entire tent colony site had been acquired by the Methodist Episcopal Home for the Aged for a new building. Due to the lingering financial impact of the Great Depression and World War II, the actual construction was put off until 1947. The date of the removal of the remaining tents is uncertain. We've shared with you some of the history of the tents in Ocean Grove. So let's move on and peek into one of today's tents. Gail Hunton, whose family has a long history in Ocean Grove and is herself a tenter, will tour you through her tent and discuss what life is like to be a tenter in today's world.
Hi, my name is Gail and this is my tent. I've had it since 2014. My family has a big family history here. My grandparents had a tent when I was a little girl, and my other grandparents had a two-family house on the south part of town, and my parents actually met here. And a funny story is they actually had their honeymoon night in my grandparents' tent down the road a piece. So I've been coming here my whole entire life, on and off, and you're going to get to see what a beautiful tent looks like, and I welcome you inside. Okay, so now we're inside of what we call the tent, and the tent, of course, is made out of canvas. I like to tell people it's like an army tent or maybe a Civil War kind of tent, so they can get the idea of that. These large poles, there's 3 of them, hold the tent up, and there's a beam that goes across the top. We just had a major storm, up to 60-mile-per-hour winds, and it's a little bit scary to hear all the noise, but they hold up mostly very well. And anyway, so in this room, when we usually have tent tours, I say that most people set up this room the way it is convenient for them. If you were a family with a lot of children or a grandparent with a lot of grandchildren coming to visit, you might have bunk beds and dressers and all sorts of storage things for people, but I don't have a lot of company, so I set this up the way I like it. And the wicker area I call my conversational area. The round table that you may have seen, that's my eating table and my work table. And I sleep in the tent unless it's really cold or really windy, but a lot of people sleep in the tent, and you get used to all the noise of people walking by or talking outside, but it's quite a different experience. A lot of people obviously have never slept in a tent overnight and would be anxious to see what that's all about. So this is the room that we call the cabin. Sometimes I refer to it, to people that don't know a lot of history, as the permanent structure. And I use this as what I refer to as my guest room, but some people prefer to sleep in this room themselves for more privacy. Obviously, you can shut the doors here and feel like you're in a room with the doors closed. One of the things I like to tell people that come to visit are about the windows. My windows are pocket windows. They slide all the way in and slide all the way out, and they let in a lot of light and a lot of air, except the only problem is that when it's going to be a rainy day, you have to close the windows, and it's very difficult to get in there. You have to have leverage to move these old windows. So these big old dressers that were here when I got here are on sliders. So I slide the dresser out, close the windows, slide the dresser back. It's an effort, but it's worth it to have the fresh air and beautiful light that comes in here. One of the issues of having a tent is storage, where you're going to have all your stuff. According to the lease, you're allowed to have up to 7 people living in the tent, so that's a lot of stuff to store. So many of the tents are designed with these 2 doors that you see on either end. Some have a door on them, some do not. And that white curtain that you see up there, that's another area for storage that you can put stuff up there. So, however they were designed, the cabins are all slightly different. Some of them have 1 closet, some of them have 2. Some of them have what we call a bump out that gives them a little bit more space. But this also, looking at the ceiling, I'm not sure that you can see that or not. somebody probably 50 or 60 or 70 years ago put that boarding up there to make it look a little bit nicer and neater, so they didn't have to see the shingles of the or the wood up there. It's not really insulated, but it does give it a nicer feel and flavor. When they walk by, wonder, how do you stay here in the winter? Well, we don't stay here in the winter. The lease is from May 15th through September 14th. Hence, most people don't need to worry about heat, but air conditioning is allowed. I just actually got this air conditioner yesterday because it does get overwhelmingly hot in here on those 90-plus days. So that's something that a lot more people are having now than they used to in the good old days. So the other thing I like to tell people who might be here on a tour is that whenever plumbing became a necessity in life, kitchens and bathrooms were added on the back of this room, and we're going to go there. So I have what I refer to as a luxury kitchen because it's a lot larger than some of the other ones. A lot of kitchens might start here and end there because, facing the facts, most people started coming here to be tenters in the summer, not to have a beautiful kitchen like you would have at your house. But anyway, so this is a larger kitchen than most. You'll see that there's that old sink that's been here for, I don't know, 80, 90 years maybe. And most people do have the stove. Everybody, of course, has the other amenities. And if you also, we're panning over to the windows of the outside, like these windows, this is a tent that hasn't really been modernized or refurbished completely. Some people will redo the whole back end and change windows and whatnot, but these windows are very old, and there's storm windows that come up and down. So when I get here in June, I put the storm windows up, and when I leave in September, I put the storm windows down. And so every tent has some form, or should have some form, of what we call a communal backyard, where there's space to hang your bathing suit to dry. So again, I call this a luxury backyard because this is larger than some of the others. Some of the tents, you walk out the back door and then the back of the other tent is right there in your face. But we have a very lovely large communal area. To the left is a private house. That patio is a private home. It is not part of the tenting community. And so it's just a beautiful space that people can use, especially the people that have children and grandchildren that can play outside. You can see everybody's garbage pails and recycling and whatnot is stored back here also. So the bathrooms are a little bit of a novelty. All the tents have them slightly different. My bathroom has the toilet, the sink or bathroom sink, and the shower all in one room. Some of the tents have the shower in the cabin. Some of the tents do not have a bathroom sink, and some of the tents might have their shower here and then their toilet in a little alcove on the other side of the tent. So you know, one of the things I like to say, it's not like a builder came in here and built everybody's bathroom and kitchen the same. Everything has quite a bit of variety. Okay, so that is an overview of the tent. What you're looking at now is a view from the cabin room through the tent. Possibly you're seeing the front door, and we hope that this piques your interest in what a tent is like in Ocean Grove, New Jersey. And hopefully next summer we would be glad to have you come for a tent tour or a walking tour that involves seeing several tents. And we hope to see you next summer. That would be the summer of 2021.